was also called the Third International, and it was created in March 1919. It was created because the differences in the Bolshevik views were becoming so big that they couldn't be avoided anymore, so they broke into a new party. It was for European socialists who were sympathetic to the Bolshevik experiment, and so they really implemented this thing called iron discipline, which was about these 21 conditions required for admittance into the Comintern. And it had things like expelling reformists and engaging in illegal agitation.
Socialism in one country. After communism failed in Germany in 1923, the Soviet regime became the sole socialist regime in the world. For 10 years, the regime existed in isolation from the rest of Europe, with the other Western European nations maintaining minimal relations. Because of the isolation, the Soviet Union began to interest in Asia. Stalin's only foreign adventure during that 10-year period was a failed effort to exploit the revolutionary situation in China. Stalin's enemies saw appropriateness in the fact that the country was being ruled by a leader whose methods recalled those of Genghis Khan. Most of Lenin's Bolshevik comrades believed it impossible for a socialist society to build itself in Russia unless the revolution were to spread to more developed countries. In 1924, Stalin launched a slogan, "Socialism in one country." By this, he meant that Russia could create socialism alone, with or without help from the outside. Stalin depicted Trotsky and his friends as men of little faith who would lead the country into peril.
Non-aggression pacts. By 1927, the USSR's interference in China had resulted in the massacre of Chinese communists and disgrace for Stalin. This caused the signing of a non-aggression pact with Chiang Kai-shek. Again in 1931 and 1932, under Foreign Minister Maxim Litvinov, non-aggression pacts were signed with the Cordon Sanitaire, which was created by the Paris Peace Conference a few years earlier. Their last non-aggression pact, signed underneath Stalin's reign, was in 1939 with Hitler's Foreign Minister Ribbentrop, who secretly negotiated a non-aggression pact with Stalin that divided Poland and allowed the USSR to occupy Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania and Bessarabia due to the USSR's demand for military presence and fear of a resurgent Germany.
Nazi Germany and its fascist state would pose against the Union. From 1934 to 1937, Stalin chose to form coalitions hostile to fascism in order to counteract the German threat. During the Communist International Movement, he decided to adopt the Popular Front policy, providing cooperation between socialist and democratic countries in order to provide protection against Nazi Germany. In 1934, Stalin chose to join the League of Nations, and within the League of Nations, his Commissar of Foreign Affairs, Maxim Litvinov, decided to advocate collective security and disarmament in order to protect themselves from German militarism. In 1935, the Soviet Union concluded military alliances with French and Czechoslovakia, and from 1936 to 1939, it aided Spain in the Spanish Civil War, the anti-fascist areas. However, after Japan and Germany signed the Anti-Comintern Pact, and Stalin decided that this would become a really real threat, the West acquiesced Hitler's demands and gave him portions of Czechoslovakia, which lost Stalin's respect in the League of Nations and ultimately caused him to drop out.
Propaganda in the Soviet Union included portraying Western powers such as France as aggressive and wanting to attack the Soviet Union. This Soviet Union propaganda poster was intended to persuade people that industrialization and collectivization creates health, happiness, and equality.